All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I just want to start out by saying thank you for being here. I know it's a late night evening on a Monday, and I know there's plenty of things that you could be doing, but what we have to share with you, our administration today, is important. So I just want to start out by saying I appreciate your time. I do not take it lightly. My name is Rodney Trice, and I'm here to share with you some important information around enrollment trends and demographic trends in the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools. So you're in the right place if that's what you're here for. This is my opening slide, and I've been in a number of venues where I've shared this presentation, and I always say the battery is running low. Okay. I might need some help up there. Yeah, we'll get that fixed. But I don't like to gloss over this slide. As you can see, it says, Shaping the Future Together, Reimagining CHCCS in a Time of Change. And the reason I don't want to gloss over this opening slide is because it is not pie in the sky. This is real. We are becoming a smaller district, and you will see this in some of the trends that I'm going to show you in just a bit. And it does require us to reimagine who we are. And that will become clearer as we kind of go along. Now, I have to warn you, there are going to be a lot of charts that I'm going to show you. So it's not to put you to sleep, but we're really here to kind of tell a story about who we are as a district, what our current reality is. We'll have time after the presentation. I don't know, I'll present maybe 20, 25 minutes or so. We'll have time after the presentation for Q&A, so I hope to get into that as well. But this is what we're here for, and this is the beginning of our conversation about how we can reimagine our school district. So when I was appointed superintendent, part of my speech, I talked about the idea that our next 25 years cannot look like our previous 25 years. And that was not, some, elaborate prediction that I was making, but it was a reality that we are facing as a district. With respect to tonight, our reality is around how schools and districts are funded, particularly in the state of North Carolina, are changing. Our General Assembly is expanding, the educational institutions that they're funding. But at the same time, at the local level, we're experiencing, as I shared with you at the opening, declining student enrollment. So if you think about the way that schools and districts are funded at the state level, we can even layer on top of that perhaps the national level with the uncertainty with national or federal funding. And then you layer on top of that declining student enrollment. Our reality is shifting, and it's shifting in a way that we're going to have to respond to that as a district. I want to say up front, this presentation is not all doom and gloom. In fact, I think there are opportunities to be had to reposition our district for innovation, flexibility, providing more choice for our families and students. And so ultimately, that's kind of where we want to be. But we are a changing district. Last year, we invited Dr. Nathan Dollar from Carolina Demography to share at our board retreat some of the demographic and enrollment trends that organization has been studying perhaps the last decade or so. In this next video, I want to show you just a 3-minute clip of Dr. Dollar's presentation at our board retreat. And I want you to just kind of take a few nuggets from the video. I mean, there's going to be a lot of information. It moves pretty fast. Some of you may have seen it. I think we've sent it out before. But just take a few nuggets from Dr. Dollar's presentation, and we'll kind of come back on the other end, and I'll start.
We did a little, data detective work. The effect of the pandemic is clear. Between 2019 and 2021 school year, net annual change in ADM in Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools, you lost 540 kids. in just that 1 year. The following year, you lost 353 kids between school years 2021 and 21-22. The loss started to abate in 23, but you still lost 21 kids and then picked back up last year. Kindergarten saw 28% decline in ADM, which is by far the biggest out of all the grades. So what's happening? This is the question at hand. You see, starting in 2014, or 2015 rather, you start to see a steady decline. This is what we would largely expect in Chapel Hill. First of all, fertility is on the decline everywhere. This is not unique to here. It's not unique to North Carolina, the United States. It's a global phenomenon. Fertility is on the decline. So what that suggests is that not only do you have declining births, but you also have fewer families moving in with preschool-age children who are going to enroll in kindergarten. The number of school-age children, 5 to 17, has been decreasing in Chapel Hill and Carrboro during our same time period. So in 2020, we were at 13,120, but during this time period, it dropped about 700 kids to 12,421 school-age children. There's a big part of your answer right there. That's a huge part of your answer of where your 1,000 kids went. That's not all of it, but that's some of it.
Your previous slide was the most unmasking for me. It isn't this question of they're here, but they're choosing something else. There's some of it was that they're actually not here anymore, irrespective of what they're choosing.
And to be clear, it's a yes and, right? So it's an out migration and it's a diversification of market shares. You saw a 61% increase in homeschool enrollment in Orange County between 18 and 21. It's reasonable to assume that some of the 1,000 students that you lost between 2019 and 2020 went to homeschools, right? And we know that some went to charters as well. So yes, so this is private school enrollment, 24% increase between 21 and 24. But again, it's likely the number of students that you're losing to private schools over this period is likely much higher, right? And so that's basically your story. If I had to put this in very broad strokes, I would say is probably about half of those 1,000 students moved out of the district and they weren't replaced. And then piecing together the number of students that you lost to homeschools, the number of students that you lost to charter schools, and the number of students that you lost to private schools. Those are your stories right there. Out migration, not enough in migration, and increasing diversification.
So as I mentioned, that video moves pretty fast, but there are a number of nuggets you can pull from it. What resonates with me is when Dr. Dollar talks about the ages between 5 and 17 years old. They're just not as many students in our district. And that's kind of largely what we're dealing with. And so I want to talk a little bit about, if my slide goes forward, a little bit about enrollment. I may need some help up there. So I'm going to show you a little bit about enrollment as soon as we are able to advance the slides and talk about why it's important. So in North Carolina, schools and districts are funded by enrollment. And so the enrollment that we have as a district dictates the amount of revenue we generate as a district. And so what you see on this chart, and I'm sorry to turn my back, but average daily membership in the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools for the last 10 years. The last decade. And you can see around 2020, we had a high right here of about 12,300 students. You fast forward to today, 2026, or the 25-26 school year, and we're sitting around 10,800 students. This is not a verified number, but you can see over the past 5 years, there's been a precipitous decline in the number of students enrolled in our schools. And like I said, why is that important? It's important because how we're funded is dependent on the number of students that enroll in our schools. And the way that North Carolina schools are funded in any particular year is based on, is based on the previous year's enrollment. So this year, this current academic year, we are funded based on 11,100 students. this academic year. Because we know our enrollment for this year, what does that tell us? That tells us what our funding will be for next year. And that's a good thing. Like we kind of appreciate that because it gives us time to plan. And you see that represents about a 300 student decrease. And so we can expect to receive fewer state dollars. So let's take a look at the math. So we know this year we're funded at 11,100 students. Next year we'll be funded around 10,825 students, which is about 300 students. And like I said, this is not a verified number. Our staff is still kind of working to kind of verify that final number. We get about $7,500 per student, which equates to about $2.1 million in state funding that we likely will not receive, because the General Assembly is not likely to kind of come in and fill the gap for us. It'd be very difficult for our county commissioners to do so as well. So as an administration, as a school district, we have to attend to this $2.1 million gap. That's our responsibility. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. But this is the math related to why we need to address this. You may know, having been in the community the last couple of years, we've also gone through we had to make a number of difficult decisions with the reduction in force, right? To reposition our district to be more fiscally sound. If we don't address this $2.1 million shortfall, that begins to erode or eat at much of the difficult decisions we had to make over the last couple of years to make our district sound fiscally. And that's why it's so critical to address it. So where did the students go? I know Dr. Dollar talked about this in his short video. I just want to pull out a few slides and just take it a bit slower and explain kind of where our students went. So in this schematic, you see between the years of 2019, 2024, the private school enrollment for Orange County. You see here, this is both Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools and Orange County Schools. We had a 15% increase between these years. You can see how we compare to our neighboring districts as well. Again, this doesn't tell the entire story around declining student enrollment, but as Dr. Dollar stated, this is part of the story, private school enrollment. Again, homeschool enrollment is part of that, the same window of years, 2019 to 2024. For Orange County, we had a 2% increase between those years, which represented about 20 students. Again, CHCCS and the Orange County schools, and you can kind of see how we compare with our neighboring communities as well. This is a breakdown of where our students are going, and this is an important slide. I know it's a bit busy, so I'm just gonna take it slow. So if you look at all the way to the right here, you see that about 71% of the students who are exiting the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools do so because they're going to another public school in North Carolina, or they've moved out of the state or the country. That represents about 71% of our outflow. Likewise, if you look just below that, the green area, this represents the students who've gone through private school, charter schools, and home schools. So that's just over a quarter of the students who choose another option. And you can see at the bottom of this chart, where those students go in terms of private schools. As Dr. Dollar said, it's not the entire story, but certainly part of the story. The interesting piece is that this happens every year. Like this is part of our narrative. We could get all of our private, charter, and homeschool students back, and it still would not, fully explain all of the outflow from our district. Now, internally, what we're also beginning to talk about is winning some of these students back, because we're in the age where every everything counts. All of our students count. So as families make different choices, we need to do a better job of understanding why. So when we think about private, charter, or home, exit interviews will be very much a part of kind of what we do to better understand why families are making different choices. And you can never really fault families for making the choices that are best for their kids, but internally, as a district, we need to better understand why families are making those choices. So the question also came up, are they even here anymore? This gets at birth rates and what that looks like in our community. This chart shows declining kindergarten enrollment over the last 10 years. You see there was a high in 2017 of 864 kindergartners who enrolled in our district. This year we're looking at 626. And so some of you elementary parents or teachers may be seeing this in your schools. I know that I certainly see it. We don't have as many kindergarten classes this year that we've had in previous years. But again, part of our story of declining student enrollment. This chart is a bit busy, but it has a lot of information in it. We're looking at a cohort view of enrollment over the past 10 years or so as well. And what you can see in this chart is a couple of things. If you follow the color patterns, these are the cohorts and how they matriculate through our school district over time. And what you see is that the cohort's survival rate is pretty consistent. So like if you look at kindergartners in 2015-16, 850 students, and you follow the line, you don't have very much drop-off. And that's the case for most of the cohorts up here. Again, like if you look at kindergarten 2018-19, you follow the line, not much drop-off at all. And sometimes, in fact, there's growth. But this chart tells another story. If you don't focus on the cohorts, but you just look at grade levels across the years, you see plenty of drop-off, which is a different story. But it's the story that continues to confirm declining student enrollment. And what's interesting is that if you look at each of the grade levels going across the years, the trend is that there's declining student enrollment from K to 8 generally, but in our high schools, they're pretty stable. So for those of you who have high schoolers or you're teaching at the high school level, you may feel that today that you're busting at the seams, right? You know, our high schools are fine, and in some ways they're growing. But what we know is that someday these K-8 students will be what? High school students. And so the prediction is that trend, the declining student enrollment that we're seeing K to 8, will follow into the high school. And so again, that's part of our story. This chart, I told you it's going to be a lot of charts. But this chart looks at graduation numbers versus kindergarten enrollment. And so what you see in the blue line here, these are students who've graduated over the last 10 years, the number of students who've graduated over the last 10 years in our district, versus kindergarten enrollment, which is the pink line. And we're graduating more students than what? We're bringing in kindergarten. You see charts similar to this, like when we do population studies, when we're looking at deaths versus births to kind of give us information about the growth of our society. But this is interesting as well because it's just another data point that confirms the story that we're telling. Dr. Dollar showed this in his 3-minute clip looking at live births in Chapel Hill-Carrboro. These are Chapel Hill-Carrboro citizens. In 2010, we had a high of 721. This is not the newest data, but what is this, 2021, 572 live births. This is important because we fully expect that as students are born in Chapel Hill-Carrboro to parents who reside in our school district, 5 years from their birth, we expect they will be entering our schools, right? And so if we see declining birth rates, we can be assured that it's going to impact our schools on some level with respect to enrollment. And in this case, it's, again, impacting the kindergarten enrollment that I showed you just a moment ago. But you can see that over time. This chart is also looking at enrollment. You've seen this data, but this is just presented in a different way. Again, kindergarten through 8th grade, you can see over the past 2020 through 2025, declining enrollment. K-8, again, our high schools looking pretty stable. And in fact, feeling pretty full. But again, those K-8 students will be matriculating to high school. And so what story does that tell us? How do we have to prepare for that? So all of this is really framed by our local context as well. So I want to share some demographics, Orange County demographics, some demographics with Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools as well, which kind of adds to our story. And so this is looking at census data for 2010 and 2020. This bold area here is for Orange County. You can see between 2010 and 2020, we grew. I think when you look around Chapel Hill-Carrboro or Orange County in general, you can get that sense that, we're in a growing kind of environment. We grew 11%. You can see our surrounding districts, Chatham, Durham, and Wake. We didn't grow to that extent, but we are kind of in a growing space. But here's the kicker. For that growth in our community in Orange County, 73% of the growth, the people moving in, are folks aged 65 and older. And that's not the population that tends to generate school-age kids, at least not that I'm aware of. I like that population. They're good for our community, certainly. But when we're talking about declining student enrollment, and we can see, based on our data, that 73% of the growth is really 65 years and older, that also tells us something about the future of our district, right? And this cannot be ignored. Again, these are all data points that kind of triangulate what our story is in our community. And so what we're doing here tonight is just really sharing facts, giving a baseline of where we are as a community with respect to enrollment and demographics. Interesting to kind of see the other communities around us growing as well, but it's just a little different. This is kind of hard to see probably from where you're sitting, but again, it tells the story about our district. So again, here we're looking at census data from 2010, 2020, 2000, 2010, 2020, and the change. And so this first yellow line is population under 5. And you can see there was an 11% decrease in the population under 5 during the documentation of that census data. The population over 60 or 65 and older, 68, almost 69%. Again, that tells the story from the previous slide, but just another way to look at it. So I want to go back to how schools are funded. I'm not going to read through this, but I think it's important. If you take anything away, it's that our funding is dependent on our enrollment. And current year's enrollment is dictated by previous year's enrollment. And because we know that we're losing students between last year and this year, or we've lost students, we have a pretty good sense of what our challenge will be next year. And that's why it's imperative that we move as a community now to begin to address what that looks like. And as an administration, I think the way I think about this is that I don't want to go from year to year to year to year tracking how many students we lost, how much money we've lost, and trying to kind of reconcile that. We've been in this new reality, which is not new, for the better part of a decade. And it's time to reposition our district to become a smaller district. We're not going to be a 12,000 or 13,000 student district. Why? Because one, our birth rate data that we have for our community doesn't dictate that we will be that anytime soon. If we begin to see upticks in birth rates and maybe shifting housing patterns, bringing families into the community, we can begin to make other decisions. But all the information we have right now dictates that we're going to be a smaller district. And there's nothing inherently wrong with becoming a smaller district, but if we do not position ourselves to be appropriately sized, then it can be a problem. Again, I know I've shown this slide before. These are not verified numbers. I think these were maybe 30th day numbers or something like that. 289 students, or about 300 students, $2.1 million is kind of where we are now in terms of, what we need to deal with, because we don't want this to eat into many of the difficult decisions we've had to make over the past couple years to reposition our district. So looking ahead together, like I said, this is not all doom and gloom. When we think about repositioning our district, it is also an opportunity to think deeply about, how do we think about programming differently? What do we want in terms of, teacher pay and benefits? Can we think about that differently, right? If we have declining student enrollment, it has an impact on our facilities, right? How do we think about our facilities differently to generate revenue to do some of the things that we may want to do as a community? And that's the conversation that I want to have not only tonight, but this is the start of a conversation about who we become as a district. First, we have to level set on what the data says. And much of this data is not Rodney up here just pontificating about enrollment. This is Dr. Dollar, Carolina Demography. They spend all day, every day, kind of looking at this type of thing. And it's incumbent upon us as a community to respond. And I've told a number of different audiences, this is a time that I think we also have to be careful, because in an environment where you may have declining resources, it becomes easier to point fingers, to blame and shame, right? I mean, declining resources is not easy to deal with. But if we go into this with our eyes wide open, stating what our values are, what is it that we want for our children in terms of instruction, curriculum, programming, opportunities. If we can go into this defining what that is and understanding the cost of defining what we want for our community, we can make a hard pivot to thrive as a district. And I think that's what districts are going to have to do around North Carolina, to be quite honest. I'm sure you've read the paper, and there are a number of districts dealing with the same thing, but how we deal with it is important, and doing it together is important to pivot our district to thrive. So that's the end of my presentation. I promise you I don't have any more graphs to show you, but I know we want to get into some questions or comments, and while we don't have all the answers, I certainly do my best to answer those. Andy, I think you have one right behind you, and we have another over here.
Good evening. I'm Andy Jenks. I'm the Chief Communications Officer. Thank you all very much for being here. We have one microphone, and for the live stream audience, as well as everyone here in the room, I'm going to walk around folks so you can ask a question.
$7,500 per head. What is the local funding? All those senior citizens are going to be paying property tax. So how much does that put in per child?
Well, that is also a per pupil amount. And so we're looking at, I don't know, yeah, about 8,000. Right. Yeah. So, you know, like I said, we're going to get the same amount of funding that we have typically gotten from the local. It has never decreased in terms of what we receive from our, local county commissioners. But our challenge is going to be to kind of fill the state funding gap.
I have another question right here.
Hi, I just want to say I really appreciate your approach and being proactive in the discussion. How do you plan on engaging the community to outline their priorities, and what methodology are you going to have? How long do we have? And how do we, what's your plan?
Well, part of that is, starting today with sharing kind of what the data is. At the end of this conversation, or actually on these sheets, you'll see a QR code where we're beginning to ask, questions around what do you envision for the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools over the next 10 years? If we are going to be a smaller district, what opportunities might that provide? And so what we're doing is collecting data from a number of different groups that we're kind of working through. And then we're just going to compile that. We're looking at a number of different protocols in terms of, how to make sense of that. Some of you may have heard of design thinking or another similar process where you can just kind of methodically kind of go through some of the feedback that you've gotten from your community. But again, even if we do that, this is going to be a more long-term conversation. If we're collecting a bunch of, what do you want Chapel Hill to be in 10 years? We still have to be able to, cost that out, see what's feasible, and that's kind of where these different processes will come in that allow us to do it. And we fully expect that there will be community involvement in that piece as well. I guess I could sit in my office and try to do that. But in our district, we've done best when we're open and transparent about what folks have said. They can see it on paper. They can see what we're prioritizing as an administration, but it's all based on feedback from you all. So I hope that answers the question. But again, there are going to be some short-term decisions we have to make around funding and more long-term decisions we'll have to make. And I think our process will be attuned to, kind of answering that question.
We'll come over to this side of the room now.
Hi, I have two questions that I think have quick answers. Back when the bond was being considered, I remember being active in that process and hearing that there was going to be a demographic study because there was this perception for sure that we needed to close schools. The demography study that was going to be done, is that what this is? And does it get into redistricting? Is that part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's not what the information I share. So the study that's going to be done, I'm sure, is going to incorporate much of what I showed tonight. But you may be aware that the Orange County Commissioners have contracted with Carolina Demography to look at student population studies for both Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools and Orange County Schools. That report is due, I believe, to the Orange County the county commissioners either in late January or February, and that's kind of where they will have more up-to-date numbers, perhaps better projections, that type of thing. I would also say that Dr. Dollar is also going to be sharing with our Board of Education on December 11th at their board retreat, where we hope to get more up-to-date numbers around our school district. And perhaps to the level of maybe predicting or beginning to predict when the enrollment decline begins to level off. Like, what is that number? That's kind of what I'm interested in. If we're not going to be a 12,000 student district, like, what is the number that we're aiming at? I can't predict that, but Dr. Dollar and his team, I think, they're really working hard to kind of help us identify what that might be.
Okay, so I think you might.
That wasn't short, was it? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So if that is happening for January, at that point, will the whole bond plan be reevaluated? Like, are we going to close schools, reconsider the fund? I know it's different, it's cap funding from the bond that would pay for it, but it just almost feels like some of that needs to be reconsidered. Like, we're in new buildings. I know that we have high expenses and some of them are unsustainable. That I understand from a cost perspective, but is the whole bond plan of which schools were getting which upgrades being rebuilt going to be reconsidered?
No, I don't anticipate that the bond plan will be reconsidered. I mean, we need newer schools. And if you could follow or track some of the spending that we're doing on our older schools, you will really understand why. And as an administration, we haven't been directed to close or consolidate any schools. I know that we're going to be talking about enrollment at our December 11th Board of Education retreat. That issue may come up given some of the information that Dr. Dollar shares, but at the same time, I think the evidence is pretty clear. As we have declining student enrollment, it has an impact on our capacity, facilities capacity as well. So we just got to look forward to that conversation, and I think we'll have a better answer mid-December.
Nothing really talked about the national trends, so I don't have a good sense of, is this a North Carolina problem? Like, I thought a whole bunch of people migrated to North Carolina in the pandemic, and like California, where I came from, would be struggling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was overall, some of the charts were national, weren't they? Like birth rates.
Yeah, and Dr. Dollar, I think he mentioned this is not a North Carolina, Chapel Hill-Carrboro thing. This is a global issue in terms of declining birth rates. But there's also a bit of nuance that, you have to look at a community like Chatham County is growing at about twice our rate. You look at Durham and Wake, they were also growing at about twice our rate. I don't believe Chatham County has declining student enrollment. So the individual communities are situated differently, particularly around our area. So, but yes, the declining birth rates, it's a global phenomenon that is impacting a lot of different areas. You can read in the paper, I know we don't have papers anymore, but on the internet, every day there's some type of article about, some school districts in some location that's had to close schools because of declining student enrollment.
And I want to remind the room, if there's just something on your mind or something you want to share in front of the crowd, it's okay to take the microphone for that purpose too. It doesn't always have to be a question. But with that, turn it over here.
Thank you so much for being here and giving all this very valuable information. I know you put a lot of time and energy into all this. I have two questions. The first, when we're looking at the enrollment numbers that you said that we know what we're getting next year because of this year's enrollment, is that like day one enrollment, last day of school enrollment, the highest for the year? Like, when do they pull that number?
Yeah, so it's kind of a lot of education jargon, but what we call them PMR, Principal Monthly Reports. And so the state funds us on the best of either the first or the second Principal Monthly Report. And so that's kind of what we're looking at now to kind of get that official number. But we anticipate it's going to be around 300, maybe even more students that we're missing.
Okay, awesome. And then, do you know the cost of running just one elementary school? Like, if we were to go from 11 elementary schools down to 10, what kind of number are we looking that like how that would go towards the 2.1 million.
Yeah. So the board asked our administration to take a look at that in terms of fixed costs associated with an elementary school. Mr. Shiroki presented that, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, and I think the number was around $1.7 million. Yeah.
Ready to go right here?
Thank you. I just have a comment. I guess as you move into the next, or the district moves into the next phase of engagement, maybe to start with a really broad question of what is the role of the school in our community as a destination and a center, and working collaboratively with partners, city, town, nonprofits. Are there other needs within the community that the school building can fill, not just kids in seats, but what else is needed? So just
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I haven't gone to the center of the room. We go here, and then I think I saw him.
Thanks so much for that presentation. I think I'm still in like an information gathering phase and just trying to understand, like, of that $7,500 per kid that we're losing, like what money are we losing? Are we losing money to the classroom teacher, to the gym teacher, to the gifted program, to the central administration? Like, because it's in some ways it seems like, oh, if you have fewer kids and you're getting less money, that makes sense. But I guess it doesn't make sense if so much of that is going.
Yeah, so state funds typically support teacher salaries, transportation, curriculum resources on some level. So those are the types of things that state funding supports. So it could be any number of things that it impacts. I know as an administration, we often get asked, particularly in audiences with teachers, does that mean positions? And I can understand why, kind of given some of the tough decisions we've had to make during the reduction in force. But our approach is to look at non-personnel items first when it comes to addressing the $2.1 million, whether that's, instructional technology, funds that supported instructional technology. You could look at personnel from the standpoint of attrition as people retire or make different choices about, working somewhere else. So before we kind of get into, teacher cuts, I think there are 3 or 4 things that I know as an administration I'm interested in looking at before kind of getting there. And it's kind of early for that, but that's a question that often comes up when we have audiences of teachers. We're interested in preserving jobs and employment in our district. We've invested heavily in our district to support classrooms and protect classrooms, and we want to kind of maintain that as much as we can.
I'm going to come back to the center of the room at some point, but right now we're back up here.
Good evening, Dr. Trice. It's Carrie Hamel. It seems like the central office is back on the innovation project, and I'm also in the information gathering stage. And I've raised before Faith Elementary in Rowan, Salisbury in June of X year was traditional public school, and 3 months later it became a charter, and it's now well over 700 students. So when we're talking about what are cost savings, what are also potential expenses? So a school building and a campus could have good use to remaining a school building and a campus. And in fact, in that community, it's become more costly to the traditional public school, not less. Where are those considerations going to be factored in?
Yeah, I don't want to get in front of, so the board needs to have that conversation in terms of, facilities, campuses. Like, we've not been directed to study school closures or consolidating schools. And so that we haven't really had discussions around what could happen to campuses if we do have to close a school, if that makes sense.
Wasn't having those advanced discussions. and now this is where it is. And so if the innovation project, if you could gather some more information, I can grab you at another time. I'd be interested to hear the different perspectives of when a campus becomes a different educational and it takes even more students away. Thanks.
I'm looking for hands in the air. Right here.
Thank you so much. This has been really enlightening. I'm trying to take it all in. I was, just a comment, really happy to hear that you're interested in preserving jobs and really protecting our classroom teachers and hopefully our enrichment programs that I think are really what keeps people in the district. And then I'm thinking about this idea of like re-envisioning as a smaller school district. And if you have any districts around the country that you know of as sort of case studies that you look at as like, this might be an interesting model to know about, just be curious.
Yeah, I don't have any that I'd like to point to at the time. We are members of the Innovation Project, which is a statewide education think tank that is looking at bits and pieces of that for us. For instance, there are schools in Denver that have had to kind of downsize, and they've kind of put in, these micro school kind of concepts that really focus on, maybe social justice, or maybe there's a focus on the environment, just different ways to kind of create choice in a community. But I haven't taken a hard look at any school districts that have had to decrease, the number of resources or buildings, and, have come up with a model that's innovative. Partly because I think a lot of that brain work can be done here. I mean, every community is different. We have a nice university next to us that can help us think through some of this. Our educators and parents have been around a while, and I think they have a good sense of what they've invested in over time. Many of our students have been successful, right? And so, continuing to maintain some of that is going to be important. I know that, about a third of our graduates in any year don't choose a 4-year university. So thinking about different pathways that we can innovate around in our schools that allow, there's just so many things that, or so many partners we can bring to the table that I don't think that would be much of a challenge to come up with something that kind of works for us. I do think we need time and space for people to kind of generate ideas and put them on the table. What I've seen not work in districts is, you come in and say, okay, we're closing this school and we're not going to think hard or long about what we want to become as a district, and you just kind of continue to do the same thing, and that typically doesn't work. So I hope that answers your question.
Got one over here.
I've seen talk or heard talk about different schools not being at capacity, and just wondering, between the elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, what that breakdown's kind of looking like, and really understanding what at capacity looks like when the cap of classes comes off.
Yeah, it may be a bit early to say what it looks like, but the cap, it does create a bit of a challenge in terms of making sure that our schools are operating at full capacity. The other thing that I will say is that we can't really point fingers at our schools or the surrounding community. We haven't done a redistricting in our district in a very long time. And so while you may have some elementary or middle schools that are operating below capacity, typically school districts do redistricting to kind of prevent that from happening. And we just haven't done that in quite some time. We'll have to do it as we bring online these new schools. So I fully anticipate, that will happen. The question has come up about consolidating schools or closing campuses. Again, that will force us to address capacity issues as well, if that comes up, because you have to redistribute those students at other schools. So I don't have, an exact picture of kind of what that looks like, but I know the process is going to happen soon because we're building schools.
As far as capacity goes, are we looking at the elementary schools really being the ones that we're wondering where the middle school and high schools are more set?
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to look at it. Yes, and that might change over time. You saw the graph where the K-8 students are declining enrollment, and they will become 12th, high school students, and that may change the way that our high schools look, but not at this moment.
We'll go right up front.
Yes, you talked about the sort of longer term, what do you want the school district to look like in the next 10 years, and that's going to obviously be a little bit more involved process, but also just the, sort of short-term funding problem for next year. And so what's your timeline for sort of solving that problem versus the bigger process and envisioning what it's going to be like in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to be able to do both at the same time. So all school districts typically in North Carolina enter budget season December, January. And so we're already in December. And so again, we'll have to begin to look at the challenge. We're looking at it now, I can tell you internally. Well, not just, I mean, we need to do that, but what I would say is that I'm asking for a deeper pivot. So it's not just about the $2.1 million or, yeah, so we'll begin to address the 2.1 immediately. Like I said, looking at our expenditures for non-personnel expenditures. We'll begin to look at attrition. Our board has asked us to look at programs and to see what academic return on investment we're getting for programs. And so those are the types of things that we'll begin to look at immediately to address that. Yeah.
I'm going to go here in just a second, but while we pause for a moment, I'll put in a plug for these sheets of paper that a lot of you have, and there's a QR code on there that has about 5 or 6 question prompts on there that you can answer those today, you can answer those a week from now, whenever a good idea comes to mind. So that forum will always be open and will help us reflect on what's important to you, our community. So just know that doesn't have to be done right now this very second, but any time that you feel like there's something to contribute. Let me go right over here.
Thank you for your time. I had a question. I might ask it, but you mentioned the academic return on investment. I've been interested in that. Will there be, once those programs are mentioned or suggested, will there be opportunities for the community to get feedback about those being cut, or do you think that's going to be just an announcement?
Yes, so I think there's going to be ample opportunity. I think what we're doing as an administration right now, or preparing to do, is essentially create a list of what all the programs are in the district and the associated characteristics, like, how many schools does it impact? How many staff are impacted? What are the budgets? And so we're planning to present that to our Board of Education at their December 11th board retreat. When I think about academic return on investment, particularly around programming, it's not only about cuts, but it's also about, if a program is working and it needs to expand, how do we make that happen? And so we really think of it as like a program review that, perhaps for many of them wouldn't be done in a year. It may take 2 years or 3 years for some. The idea is that we need to, one, prioritize which programs need reviews. All of our programs need it, but we just haven't had that in our district. But we're operating at such a time where we need to know on any given day, what programs are working for us. If they're not working, we need to be able to take them offline right away because they're not helping kids. And right now, we're just not able to kind of make that type of decision because we haven't done the data collection around it.
Okay. Well,
Anyway, so I wrote, during the bond issues, we watched placement of FBG move to various schools, with each local school, their families protesting until the board moved to another school. I would say it felt chaotic watching it as a parent who didn't really have a dog in the fight. How will you ensure that you, your administration, and the board have the resolve needed to carry through these decisions, even if you receive significant community feedback from the community? And I say that because I've read it. We are way under, we are so under capacity. I think we should close schools already. And I say that having gone to 2 different elementary schools that I think are on the chopping block.
I mean, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a great answer other than I think that's why spaces like this is important. I'm sure we're going to look at some of the characteristics of schools if that issue comes up. You know, what's the expense of keeping them online? You know, which are most expensive to kind of keep online? Which schools are the oldest? You know, those types of things. So I imagine that there are going to be more hard and fast drivers that kind of help us, you know, identify that. But again, I don't want to get in front of the board. I want to keep my job, you know. I know that's a conversation that is likely to happen given, you know, our trends. But again, you know, we're in a space where we're going to have to build new schools, partly because some of our older campuses are just sucking funds out of our, you know, our bank account, so to speak. And so we gotta move.
Let's go right here.
Thank you for sharing all of the data. It made me think more about what is the town doing to partner with you on more immediate action that they can take to kind of stop the bleeding, because really a lot of this goes back to affordable housing, right? And so we can adjust to this decrease in students that we're predicting for next year, but really when I see that huge number of, what was it, over 70% of housing was sold to 65 and older, does the town also want to grow the family population here, and how are they partnering with you to do so?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think both towns have been great thought partners, and certainly there are commitments to affordable housing, you know, kind of in our area. The challenge is that much of where we are now, the decisions were made 15 years ago or 20 years ago about condos and, you know, apartment complexes and those types of things. And we're kind of landlocked. We don't have a lot of land to bring in industry or, you know, build additional housing. So I know there's a commitment. I'm not sure how much can be done at this point. I'm sorry, you know, I pick up, you know, I read the news and I see where there's more development, more affordable housing being placed in our community, and hopefully that is a driver for some increase in bringing in families who have young children. That's the goal. But I'm not, you know, I don't predict that that's going to be 2,000 students coming in. I mean, it'd be great if it were, but I'm just not sure that anyone is in a position right now to say this is the plan to kind of win families back. I think we need to, you know, keep the students and families we have with us now. As a superintendent, I want to better understand why families are making different choices. Is there something that we can do about that when it comes to private school, homeschool, charter schools? And that's, you know, one reason we're having conversations like this, but we're tightening up our exit interviews for families who are kind of withdrawing students. But again, you know, that's not, you know, I mean, it's a part of our story, not the major part of our story. But great question, though.
Dr. Trice, I'm going to go over here, and I know our publicized time is until 7:30, so if folks do have to slip out, no hard feelings, but I know you'll be around to chat with folks one-on-one once we wrap up here. But let's go for a comment or a question right here.
Thanks so much for the really interesting and informative presentation. I appreciate it. I just wanted to jump off that question. I thought it was such a good point, because we have actually seen a huge amount of growth in Chapel Hill in terms of the building that's been going on, and there's been a lot of discussion about whether it's the appropriate kind of building, the strain it's putting on our resources, but also the legitimate discussion around how it's bringing in taxes, but it does seem to have kind of failed us as a town in a certain way. Like, I know that it's bringing in more tax dollars, and that helps and it solves things, but it also does not seem to have been a successful strategy in terms of making Chapel Hill a more family-friendly place to be. And I hear what you're saying about these decisions were made quite a long time ago. We're kind of stuck with them now. But I think it'd be very interesting to document some of the learnings about how the urban planning has been done here and the unintended negative consequences of just of the way that the urban planning has been done, so that other areas that go through this development process in the future might learn something from it. Might be outside of your scope, but I think it's really important to capture it.
No, I think that's really smart. I mean, it's not all about declining birth rates. It is also about housing, and I'm interested in that narrative only because when you get in front of groups like this, you have to, paint the entire picture, and housing is very much a part of that, and this needs to be recognized. I think we were at the Board of County Commissioners, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, and there was a really neat presentation given by some of their staff that took a deep dive into housing, and you could see some of the challenges presented with affordable housing, what that did to or does to our population, particularly school-age children. So I know that the conversations are happening. I'm just not sure that it helps us as a school district in the immediate future become what our trends are telling us we are becoming.
If anyone under the age of 18 has something on their mind, it's cool if you say something too, so I'll be looking for you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very informative. I went to school here. My kids have gone to school here, and I worked at Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools. And Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools is absolutely amazing. And we have so many opportunities, and we've given so much to our kids, and to our teachers are phenomenal. And I guess I'm wondering, how are we advertising that? Because we are distinguished in a lot of ways, and when you go just outside, we are so lucky for what we have, and so many people want it. So I'm wondering, what are we doing? Are there possible ways of advertising the things that we have here, the opportunities that we have here? Because we really do have a lot more than other places. And that was one thing. And then the other thing I'm going back to is housing. And I know that's not anything that we can do, except for when we go to the Chapel Hill Board and to Carrboro, I'm hearing a lot when I go there for people who are fighting for their housing. And we currently have places where we've got lots of children whose housing is up in the air right now because they're talking about tearing down these spaces. So I'm wondering, is there any partnering or even going there as the school district saying, hey, these are places that you're talking about taking down and putting high-rises up, because there are communities, and these are low-income housing that we're talking about currently.
Yeah, I'll take the second question first. I think, where we could have the most impact is sharing exactly what the impact is on the school district in terms of declining student enrollment. So when you see, a 2-bedroom, $650,000 condo being built, that's not exactly the type of thing that invites 3 and 4-year-olds or new families, at least not when I had 2 or 3 and 4-year-olds. But like I said, those are decisions that are made in different spaces, but we can certainly be there to kind of talk about this is the impact, this has been the impact, and I think we're kind of seeing that more and more. So I'm right with you. So in terms of partnering, I think we have strong partnerships with both towns. We meet frequently. We're sharing data. Our Board of County Commissioners, we have established meetings on a regular basis where we're all sharing this information. So I think there's opportunity, but I'm just not sure that, is that going to change our reality in the next 3, 4, 5 years? I don't know that I would bet on that. But that's not to say that we shouldn't continue that conversation. To your first point about telling our story, I couldn't agree more. I think this is where public schools have to think about ourselves differently. We traditionally haven't marketed ourselves to families. One, because we have a responsibility to take care of the public's money, and it's kind of hard to think about creating a McDonald's commercial or something for the school district. But I think we're at a point now where a quarter of our families in any given year are choosing something else, and I know I want to do a full court press in winning those folks back, even to the point of picking up the phone. How's it going in your charter school? Is it going well? We want you back. This is why we want you back. Like, those are the types of things that I think public schools need to be able to do to tell our story. And I know Andy and we've been kind of talking about that for a while. How do we market ourselves? And the great things that we do. Last month, we invited our Board of County Commissioners, some of them, to tour our schools. That was an eye-opening experience for them to kind of see our automotive programs, to see our, AutoCAD programs, our, just the neat things that our students are doing in biotechnology. Like, those are amazing opportunities to kind of tell our story to those who fund us. So it's not only marketing to families that, are not in our space yet or not in our district, but we have to market to those who really support us, who fund us, so they know exactly what's going on in our schools and why it's important to fund us.
I see a couple of repeat hands, but is there anyone who has not yet had the opportunity to hold the microphone who would like to say something? Let me go right here.
Hi, I want to repeat what everybody said about how great it was to have this level set, as you said. I think one of the areas that I keep finding my brain going back to is the kindergarten enrollment. And it's partly because it seems like it's a little bit of the black box of because we don't have exit interviews, we don't know where people are going. I also have anecdotes from our neighborhood of people choosing homeschool, people choosing private school, and talking with them about their choices. And so I'm curious kind of what is the potential to gather information on that. And some of what they've talked about isn't even what I would call traditional marketing. Like, they're like, man, I wish I could have met some of the kindergarten teachers. Especially since, as we saw, like, once you're in this school system, you don't leave. And so it seems like catching folks right there at the beginning is such an opportunity.
No, I think that's smart. We have staff that do something similar, but with like pre-K, at the pre-K level, like they're out in the community, visiting daycares, talking to families about the school district. But I think we're at the point now where, if in your community, if there are a group of parents, particularly with, kindergarten age students or lower elementary age students, and they're thinking, about something different, and it's just the information piece, I think that's where we have to be flexible enough as an administration to be, approachable. Whether that's me coming to a hot dog dinner or our staff or whatever, I really think that's what it is. In the beginning of my administration, I talked about making Chapel Hill-Carrboro feel small again, not in, our ambition, but in connection. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult for, someone or a family that's thinking about kindergarten, kind of meet kindergarten teachers. Like, they're right down the street, and they're very nice, and I'm sure they would be, very open to kind of talking if that's the issue. But that's kind of what it is, and I know there are other things that kind of play into that. But again, it's an information piece I'm finding on a lot of different levels. back to that marketing question that came up, you know, folks just don't have all the information, and we can do a better job of telling our story as a district.
I'm going to go right here. And we are up against like an 8 o'clock deadline to have the doors closed in place. So again, if you have to slip out, no hard feelings.
So I'm kind of one of those parents that almost went to private school, got down to she was number one on the wait list, and I chose a different elementary school for her 5th grade year. It's going fabulous. I'm so glad we didn't have to leave this district. So I'm invested to make this a better district. So on your handout, one of the bullets at the bottom says, even if we didn't lose, even if we don't count for all of the kids that have gone to private and charter, it still doesn't make up the difference. So I feel like we have to, right now, we're at a point to like, what do we want to cut or change in the short term that's going to make the 10 years better? And that's where I'm at. Because in 10 years, I only have maybe not even one kid. Yeah, no kids. I don't have a kid in the district in 10 years. So I want to lay the groundwork so my 8th grader wants to come back and have her kids go. So I'm in it for the short term and the long term. So I guess I want you to think about the middle kid. I think we have great programs for kids that are struggling. I think they're great. I think we have great programs such as LEAP. The middle is what I want to see focused on. Like, think about a large campus. Can we make it a K-8? That's like, you mentioned some of the programs, like maybe it's a social justice school. It's still a neighborhood school, but maybe it has this piece where you could bus in for this special program. Like, what are we passionate about in Chapel Hill? And we're at a unique opportunity to like use funding for a new school, but also kind of cut some things because we have to. Like, I don't know about you, but I have a budget at home, and like, it's got to zero out, and we can't run a $2 million deficit. Like, so the action time is now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you, especially around the ideas of innovation. And I like to tell folks, like, this is not a crisis. The 2.1 million is not a crisis. You know, we're not about to shut down the district. We're at a crossroads, though. A crossroads where we need to decide as a community, like, what do we want to become? How do we want to innovate? And that's kind of what I'm proposing to our community, is not to go year to year to year dealing with things like this, but how do you make, to your point, a deeper pivot to say, if we're going to be a 9,500 student district, how do we pivot towards that and think deeply about what type of programs and services and, you know, opportunities we want for our students. So, and that's what we're starting now. You even in terms of some of the QR code questions that you'll see if you get a chance to dive in. We just met with our Superintendent Teacher Advisory Council earlier today. You know, same things, you know, they were really thinking deeply about, you know, themes at our schools and what that might do. Do we expand dual language? I mean, there are all kinds of things that came up. STEM opportunities came up, you know, for our school. Like, there were so many that it'll be a good exercise to compile all that, distill it, and really begin to prioritize and flip back to the community. Okay, so here's what we're saying. What do we want to actually do? And if we understand that and we understand the costs associated with, you know, what we want to do, then that'll tell us how deeply we have to pivot.
Dr. Trice, I'm going to come here one more time.
Okay.
And I'll ask you to close this out after that.
I'm sorry for taking up all my time. I've got a question I've been wanting to ask for a while, and a hypothesis. People going to homeschool, I think there was the pandemic obviously opened a lot of eyes, right? And because we got addicted to screens, both on the teaching side and on the student side. A hypothesis, what if we got rid of iPads and Chromebooks? And how could it not be practical to like phase them out, or to have a fewer number, or like instead of just per classroom, like, is that the same pot of money? You alluded earlier to like the 7,500 is for teachers, but I was assuming it's still one big pot of money. You get to decide how the 7,500 versus the local versus whatever else is spent. Is that true?
Well, the technology funding on some level is different than the funding that we're looking at now. But that's not to invalidate kind of what you shared. So you may know that we have an advisory group seeking to develop a local technology plan that kind of will guide our approach to technology. And whether that's, getting rid of one-to-one or even limiting, various technology devices in our schools, really looking forward to their findings in the spring. That's going to be a living document, so I'm sure they're going to answer some questions around technology use, but perhaps not all. But again, when I think about technology, I know most immediately from a state dollar standpoint, sometimes instructional technology is taking up a lot of, those dollars. And I know in our district we've used instructional technology programs sometimes a bit more than we probably needed to because we haven't really had state adoptions regularly. Now the state of North Carolina for the last couple of years have been really good at restarting our curriculum adoptions, and we fully intend to kind of follow that pathway. Just last year, we adopted a science curriculum, you may be aware. It was a non-technology-based curriculum, more hands-on, more project-based, and so we're actively making decisions about what's the best use of our curriculum resources to drive learning in our classrooms, and so technology will be, very much a part of that conversation. Yeah, it's.
Want the recording to hear you too.
I was just going to say, I have a middle schooler and 2 elementary schoolers and then a preschooler, and so I just would like to jump on what you're saying, and I have a pulse on various levels. And the preschool, the incoming people are terrified of the testing and the screens. And as a middle school parent, I hate them too, so I've joined the digital community. And I do really, actually, what I want to say is I think you will recruit more kindergartners if you do away with it, because the pendulum is swinging, So you will recruit way more people, especially in Chapel Hill, where we have all these smart people, when you follow the science.
All right, I'm going to close this out, but as I said in the beginning, I'm just incredibly thankful that y'all spent your evening with me. I hope it wasn't a waste of time. Like, our goal was really to kind of level set around some of the data that is impacting our school district, the budget. And this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. So I hope you'll stay engaged when opportunity presents itself. We have some short-term things we want to do, but also some long-term thoughts that we have, and we're really going to need as much feedback and input as we can get. And I would say you all are kind of the ambassadors now. So, there can be a lot of misinformation in our community around declining enrollment and what the numbers mean. But as you see, all the data is here, and we're sharing it, 4 or 5 other times, and you'll have access to this if you don't already have access. And just return to some of these slides. If you have any questions that pop up, feel free to reach out. I know we have staff that could also answer questions if they're more nuanced. But again, just thank you for spending some time kind of thinking through this with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.